I think that would take a lot of the angst out and problems that people, are afraid of. Because like the Catholic Church, there's heterosexual people that they will not marry. I mean, and no one thinks too much about that in the secular world, but they just see the whole same sex and they kind of freak out. But I think there needs to be a clear separation of that, and where the sacred world should not interfere with the secular world, and vice versa, as far as like, forcing churches to bend their rules on those sort of things.
There is such a thing as a Christian couple.
Yes.
Like to be married in a Christian church.
Yes, in some.
So you can't,
I agree, but we're talking about like the Catholic Church or other
Christian churches. And I mean, I happen to have a case on
Sure.
Christian.
Yes, ma'am.
So.
And I am 100% in favor of all of it, and there are some churches that welcome that relationship. But like, I work for the Catholic Church, and I know their stance. I mean, like I said, there's heterosexual couples that they would refuse to marry. It's in their bylaws of. There's a lot to it, but secularly, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's about rights, and they're. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally for that. I'm just saying that that's what a lot of Republicans that are so upset about this, they're afraid of that's going to happen next. That they're going to force like priests to.
Let me just jump in there and be very clear. The Supreme Court case said that government officials are required to recognize marriages of two people of the same sex.
Right.
There's never been a legal requirement that the Catholic Church marry divorced people, or that the Catholic Church marry Baptist
Right,
people.
exactly.
Or
And
that
so-
Orthodox Jewish rabbis marry a Jew and a non-Jew.
Right, so
Right.
the issue's never going to be that the Catholic Church is required to marry a same-sex couple who shows up on their door. The issue that's going to come up is the Catholic Church owns a 300-unit apartment complex, and they won't let the gay couple in it because they consider it to be married housing, and they don't consider that couple to be married. Or the Catholic Church operates an adoption agency that receives state funding, and they don't want to service and allow a gay couple to also adopt a child as well as the other. So the issue's never going to be that the priest is required to marry anybody. It's going to be on these issues where the church has business interests, operates a daycare, has an adoption agency, something of that sort, operates a rents out a social hall to all bingo games and anything else, but then doesn't want to rent it to this particular couple. So just to be clear, there's never going to be a requirement that the church has to marry anybody.
Just like it's like with abortion. Doctors don't have to do abortions. They have a choice whether they're going to do it or not. It's similar.
Yeah. So I think choice is ultimately also what it comes down to for a lot of the libertarians. I'm going to get back to the liberty perspective on this. I wrote an article after the Supreme Court ruling that kind of breaks down the different libertarian views on this. That I think also speaks to, I said before, the sort of the left-right spectrum in libertarianism. You have anywhere from people who are essentially libertine, they're go out and do whatever, be crazy, to people who are actually pretty personally socially conservative, yet they don't believe that the state should intervene in people's personal lives. So you have that spectrum of these people, and you have that tension within the liberty movement broadly. And I think that you also have a tension in terms of how the courts operate and whatnot. There are really two most prominent views in the libertarian world, and I think John explained one of them, separating government and marriage. I suppose for that in theory, but I think maybe I'm one of the libertarians who more strongly agrees with the court's decision, where insofar as marriage is civil, it does need to be equal. There is a 14th Amendment protection there. There are a lot of libertarians who do believe that. I think the most prominent ones intellectually come from groups like the Cato Institute. They've been making that argument for quite some time. But there are also some people who identify at least as libertarian leaning that are afraid that any growth in government, even if it maybe creates more equality, is a threat to self-government and therefore should be something that is not done. I don't agree with those particular libertarians, but I think if we're talking about liberty perspectives, especially liberty perspectives within the Republican Party, that is a perspective that's there. In my article, I cite someone who talks about that. They're so concerned about self-government and federalism just think increasing the 14th Amendment is too much of a threat to self-government that they're opposed to it. I don't share that view, but it's something that I think needs to be said. I think ultimately what matters more, Felicia was talking about culture, I think the reason that you've seen such a rapid change in this is because, for example, people of my generation, people who are gay were never foreign to us. I grew up with an aunt who is gay. She and her wife were raising a son who was just a few years younger than me. This is something I was exposed to my entire life, so it never was bizarre to me, the idea that gay people could get married. So I think more than anything, it's a cultural shift, and politics, even the court that's supposed to be insulated from that, it's always going to reflect that social change, and I think that's what we're seeing mainly. And as a more socially moderate, libertarian Republican, I'm happy about that, and I'm happy that my generation, Republicans, Democrats, everyone, tends to have more of that social tolerance. That's something I see as positive.
Jeff, did you want to chime in?
Sure do. I'm very much a constitutionalist because I believe the Constitution is a document that properly interpreted and properly used helps secure our liberties. And so I read a lot of Supreme Court opinions because I feel strongly about a lot of the issues that come up for review in those decisions. And I'm very mindful of the way historical decisions have really a profound impact on our lives. I can cite specific cases that have done that. In this one, I would say this is the definition of winning ugly. I like where we got to. I don't like how we got to it. However, I'll quickly say that any reservations I have about the somewhat convoluted logic in that decision were far overshadowed by the the previous decision on the ACA, which I think is just horrible. And not because I want the ACA repealed. I think the language in that decision is frankly a threat to democracy and a threat to government by consent of the governed. I think there was a little bit of that in the decision on marriage equality, and that frustrates me because I think a positive good was accomplished, but this is a case of the court deciding what we want to decide first and then trying to figure out how we can squeeze that into the laws and precedents that we already have to work with. So I'm not a big fan in that respect, but I'm glad we have marriage equality. Another thing is, like John, I have been saying that the government needs to get out of marriage to the extent that it can, and I've been saying that for quite a while. And what I find a little disconcerting is that every time, I usually zig when the socially conservatives zag. And by socially conservatives, I mean that wing of the party that is not concerned with liberty at all, but is concerned with what they believe is tradition and their theology and how they perceive what the nation should be, and in their minds they're trying to perfect the nation as they see it. I often zig when they zag, and what's happened a couple times now is after a court case has really gone against them, they'll start using the language I used before the court decision. And so I want to say I've been saying the government should get out of marriage for years. I did not become a convert to that position 2 weeks ago. And I think a lot of the people in our movement were saying that for years, and we're a little frustrated that now people are saying the words, but they don't really mean the same thought that we have.
But here's the thing, you put the language in the zeitgeist
Yeah.
now, and so it moved them into a place
Yeah.
that helps. So, that's another way liberty people drive conversations, why candidates and issues are up in front now than they weren't before, because of all those words, because of all those phrases that get into their heads and stay there and then come back to be useful later.
And yeah.
Okay, we're all Republicans here, okay? How are you gonna handle the zaggers? There's a lot of wildfire out there right now. And how are you going to change minds and hearts and get folks to, through policy changes and discussions, et cetera, to get people to change their hearts and their minds about this issue? Because there are folks out there that are on the warpath because of this, in this party. And then there are folks who are thinking about running for public office under this party flag who are going to be asked to pass certain tests and answer questions a certain way in order to be allowed to run. How are you gonna handle those folks?
Well, I served on the vacancy committee in Harris County Republican Party, which was during the 2 years that I served on it, was very narrowly dominated by those people. We had a lot of 5-4 decisions on whether to admit somebody into the party or not, as a precinct chair. And my experience is they won't change. They won't change until something beats them over the head. And the day when they come to after getting hit over the head, then they're a convert. And that's just my experience. That's the way it's going.
I want to address that too, because priorities matter. And we could go around the room and ask everybody what your number one issue is. You would have 25 different answers, obviously. But there are some things of which I am far more afraid because I know about those things. I know things that government could do to me that are far more destructive to my life than what the guys next door living in the house across the fence from me are doing. That's part of it, though. What you do now is you redirect. You talk about issues that matter to everyone as wide as possible. And it really is going to, I'm serious, I think the issue is going to lose, maybe not right away, maybe not right in Texas, but is going to lose some of that red meat ability to be moved, because people have just sort of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to claw your arm off. People are just going to sort of, okay. There is a faction who are deeply committed to establishing a social conservative political order. I understand that. I get that. I know who they are.
Yeah, voted out in a primary recently.
Right. We're making inroads in Harris County against that sort of thinking. But, you know, honestly, some people are just going to have to get old and age out, promote themselves up to the next level, whatever. There is some of that. We're going to have to outweight some people, but bring in young conservatives like we have here.
The vast majority of us can support that.
And young liberty people to those things, to be active and not letting them quit, not letting them walk away because they get frustrated on a different thing, does make a difference and does make a long-term impact. And eventually the culture becomes, yeah, okay, so what? And we'll get there.
So last question on this, Bill. Well, first, Felicia, maybe address the geopolitical ramifications of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Sorry?
The geopolitical ramifications of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Because you liked referencing all the Will Smith.
Oh, yes. Okay, go for
That's the
it.
first thing. But for what the judge was asking about, let's not become them. They tried to shut out debate. They tried to shut out people. You beat them because they've been beaten. I won't put it on you. I had so many judicial candidates come to me over the years and say, I don't want to give these people money, but I don't know how else to win if I don't give them money. We've shown them another way to win. You don't shut the way you get rid of them is not necessarily trying to shut it out. Now, I do think you're going to see at the next executive committee here within Harris County, there are going to be some resolutions that are going to make it very difficult for them to operate as it has been elsewhere around the state. They're addressing the newsletters. I think most people know what I'm talking about when we talk about the newsletters. But you don't shut them out. You do. We just beat them. They've been beaten. We have beaten them. They're not gone. You know what? That's fine. One, a good, healthy party is going to require some vigorous debate. It will be nice to start debating some more substantive issues in the party, like the future of the country's economy, the region's economy, and things that really affect our lives. But I think the answer from a political operative standpoint, the way to do that, I'm sorry to speak for the board, is we've already beaten them, and you just keep beating them. I think the last thing that we need to do is become them and try to shut down the debate.
Well, I don't know that anybody really takes the view that shutting them out is good. It's that you're going to have to wait some people out that are still going to be thorns on issues of, any number of issues, not just this one. But also, if you think of this as a family, Andy Page, Party of Choice, comes up with this dynamic. The left is a collective, and they do things together because collectively it works for them. It's not so much what an individual wants, but it's what's decided, and they move in that direction. But on the right end of the spectrum, we try try to be more of a family, to think of each other as, you know, the cousins that maybe I don't see very often because we don't agree with a whole bunch, but I'm gonna have you to dinner anyway. And if we're doing that, if we're still talking and engaging with people, no matter what faction they're in, that's a far stronger dynamic than a collective that just gets marching orders and goes. So thinking about that, yes, we have some cousins that, you know, might be of the Arkansas persuasion, no offense if anybody's from there. But, you know, people who you know, those weird guys in Wyoming or whatever, they're still family, and we have to think about this.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because I know we're getting close to our meeting time. Real quick, down the line, starting with Jeff, moving back this way, where do you see the Liberty faction going in the Republican Party?
I see it growing. I see it growing considerably. I see it growing at the expense of other factions. I think more than anything else, demographics is on our side. I ran for office this last cycle, and I'm very fond of telling people that in my Texas House district, which is what I ran for, the average age of the Republican primary voter was 59. So I'm a little younger than that. I'm a young guy on the block. And I think that as the demographics shift and change, I think the Liberty faction is going to be a rising star, and I see nothing but good things ahead for it. Demographics is destiny.
Yeah, I see our faction growing as well. Just to follow up on something that a couple of made up points on, we're still kind of the loud minority. So people are going to get frustrated, they're going to get turned off by the majority, kind of shoving their boot in our face, again, telling us to go sit in the corner and they don't want to listen to our ideas. But we have to resist that, and we have to overcome that, and we will. It's unfortunate you've seen through the 2008 cycle and the 2012 cycle, especially in sort of the liberty movement, specifically with the more libertarian folks, trying to say just drop out of the GOP altogether and either become anarchists or go work within the Libertarian Party proper. And you know, there's really, in my opinion, no chance of legitimate reform through those means. I think we have to do it through the GOP. I think we're seeing success. I think just by us driving the dialogue from a completely different angle is allowing people to open up these conversations, sort of expand their thinking. And it's not going to happen overnight, but eventually their thoughts and minds and hearts will be won over, and we'll have success.
Yeah, you know, Jeff and John said basic faction is growing. I don't even see it so much as growing, I see it as mainstream. You know, when I go to Houston Young Republican meetings, for example, I mean, John is the president of HYR. You know, it's pretty mainstream for most young Republicans to be at least somewhat libertarian leaning. It's extremely common. They may not have been, you know, big Ron Paul people or whatnot. I love Ron Paul in a way, but also have mixed feelings myself. You know, it's not necessarily about one person or one type of libertarian, but the type of young Republicans that exist in the party now. I think it's more mainstream than it's ever been. I read something in the New York Times recently by a liberal professor who, she said in the face of the marriage equality ruling, you know, liberals shouldn't be too excited. You actually are seeing more of an ascendancy in libertarianism in the country than liberalism. And she said that, of course, in a negative context. She was talking about support for gun rights, you know, being more conservative, support for fiscal reforms, just all these types of things you start seeing in basic polling and attitudes, a more libertarian perspective. I think the challenge, especially for people who represent the Liberty faction in the Republican Party, is to show that we come in good faith. We're not here just to, you know, have a hostile takeover. We're here to truly be involved and be positive. And it does bother me that there are some libertarians who just always want to be aggressive, but you can find the worst in any faction. And, you know, I think you need to come to each other, have a conversation, interact positively, and I'm optimistic that my generation is going to add a lot of positivity, and I see that being part of Liberty.
When you add dye to a glass of water, the more dye you add, the more deep the color goes. And I think that's what's happening is more young people, more libertarian-minded people, more converted people that are converting to libertarianism, to liberty movement, begin to infiltrate. You will find that it is impossible to get out in perpetuity, at least at least hold on to it as long as I'm around. Whatever happens after that, I'll get off. But seriously, the more I see groups like HYR, like LCR, like RLC, I see these guys come and girls, very willing to work, very willing to be partners with other people with whom they might not agree, work on campaigns that maybe nobody else has even heard of. That's huge. That's cred. That is how you change the world. And hats off to all of you guys who've been doing that sort of stuff while I've been just sitting at home typing on my computer, because that's incredible. That's amazing. And, you know, children are our future. I'm just saying. No, really though, that is what I have to look forward to. I'm so excited about that because I remember how things used to be. I remember how difficult it was to stand up in a room and say, hey, no, that's not right, that's not fair, we shouldn't do it that way. I don't care if you've always done it that way. And I was the only voice doing that in the room. Yeah, it's so cool to have allies now.
Okay, so, don't anybody get up because we got, we're joined by a candidate here in a minute who will give an opportunity to speak here in just a moment. We're also going to be voting on our mayoral endorsement right after. But before you do, let's give a big round of applause to all you guys. All right. So, Mr. Travis, you want to speak?
Oh, I didn't expect that. Thank you. My name is Greg Travis, I'm running for District G City Council. If you like the way everything's going in the city now, don't support me. If you want to shake it up, I'm going to be that person. Okay? I'm an attorney, I'm an advocate, I've been practicing law for 24 years, I've never lost a trial, and there's a reason for that. I don't like to lose. Right now our city is losing, and I think we need to put on the right track. There's so many problems here, I don't want to go into it now because it's getting late, everyone wants to go home and do other things. GregTravisCampaign.com is my website.